A Simplex converted to a Great Western Railway Prairie Tank, Part 51. Removing the valve gear from the right hand side of the engine and finishing my curry. This engine has what's called Walschaerts valve gear. Here is a list of the different parts: the lifting arm, the expansion link, the eccentric rod, the motion bracket which supports it all, the radius rod and drop arm. This is a slide valve engine, so the drop arm is fastened in a different way than it would be if it was a piston valve engine. In a piston valve engine, the radius rod is connected to the top part of the drop arm. Time for the strip down, and it was really fiddly. I cannot understand why the builder used so many different sized nuts and bolts on this. I spent most of the time looking through my tobacco tin full of small spanners. This part that fits in the radius rod is called the die block and allows the lifting arm to slide up and down. I've temporarily refitted this to the drop arm so I don't lose it. I braved the cold and went out up to the workshop to get this socket, but I needn't have bothered. This was the only part that it fitted. As you can clearly see in this clip, the nut below is much smaller. All these different sizes of nuts and fixings made it difficult. I think I'll have a look how the curry's coming on. Oh yes, it's boiling nicely. I think I'll turn the cooker down and leave it to simmer for about an hour before I consume it, or part of it. I would normally cook a curry for a lot longer than this. That's why I use plenty of water, because that evaporates. And while it's evaporating, I'm going to get back to the job. With my back or adjustable spanner at the back, and now you see why I use an adjustable spanner, because there are so many different sized nuts and bolts on a steam engine. But be warned, all adjustable spanners are not equal. Once I'd freed the combination lever, I refitted the pin into the valve fork. It's time now to do a really fiddly job. I have to remove the bracket that holds the expansion link. This is bolted to the main motion bracket using 3 bolts that are far too long for the job. This is going to take a while just to get them out of the hole, and the only spanner I could find that did the job, once again, was one of these really cheap laser cut spanners from Blackgates Engineering. As always, I have nothing to do with Barco spanners or Blackgates Engineering. I just try and give honest advice. When I see a tool that's useful, I will recommend it. This pin took some removing. It was actually stuck, but finally it came loose. Then I refitted it where I found it so I wouldn't lose it. By the way, this small link at the bottom of the combination lever connects to a bracket on the crosshead. This job takes a lot longer than you first think. Even though most of the parts are quite loose, I still cannot withdraw this rod through the slot in the motion bracket. The radius rod has a die block that fits inside the expansion link, and this is a permanent riveted over fixture, so the radius rod and the expansion link are always together as one unit. Here's the bracket that held the expansion link in place, with its 3 bolts that I'm definitely going to shorten. Here's a very small selection of spanners, and most of them didn't fit the nuts and bolts on the engine. I really do give in. I'll see how my curry's doing. Oh yes, it's boiling quite nicely, as you can see. I've tasted it using a spoon, after which I wash the spoon. I don't reuse it. And the good news is the curry is tasting rather splendid. I must admit, it's not quite as good as a curry you would get from a very high-class Indian restaurant, but it's much better than some curries that I've had in the past. And the good thing about my curries is that they aren't very greasy. Now the job gets even more fiddly. These are really small nuts and bolts. Luckily, I did have a spanner that fitted these. I think they are 8BA size. The expansion link is made up of the expansion link itself, permanently fastened to the die block through the radius rod. And not only does it have metal plates each side with a central pivot, it has some very, very small packing pieces in between the expansion link and the side plates. Here are the main components on the bench, and as you can see if you look carefully, the combination lever is bent. Is this because it didn't fit properly? I will look into this before I refit it. Progress has been made. The valve gear is now fully removed from the right hand side of the engine. And now it's time to sample the delights of my curry. As you can see, I made lots of it. I'm going to freeze some for myself and give some to my family who live across the road. Normally I would make more curry than this, but I didn't buy sufficient chicken. Well, it's looking good. The consistency is just nice and there's plenty of liquid if you're going to have it with rice. But unfortunately, I cannot do rice or pasta because I'm type 2 diabetic. I'm not even sure if the wine's okay, but it tastes good. And as I mentioned in the last episode, this wine is called Lindeman's Gentleman's Collection. Highly recommended. Before I get any comments, I do not eat food this fast. The video footage is currently running at twice normal speed. Multitasking once again, I'm examining the valve gear whilst eating my curry. I think a bit more wine would go down well. And maybe some more. I'm really giving the wrong impression here. I do not drink very much. So that's about it. The bowl is empty and the wine glass is empty. As usual, I will say stay healthy, thanks for watching, and I hope you found it useful. Please take the time to visit my Mainsteam Models website and click on the section of the website that says Video Playlists. And by doing that, you can find other videos that you may like to watch. And by using the playlists, you can actually watch the videos back to back.